Bajaj again. I'm the chair of the Department of International and Multicultural Education. Our department includes 3 programs: the Doctor of Education EDD program in International and Multicultural Education. Raise your hand if you're in that program or have a degree from our EDD. Woo! All our illustrious doctors. And right now, in this iteration of the program, we have concentrations in language and culture, racial justice in education, and human rights education. We have the Masters in TESOL. Who's in the Masters in TESOL or has been in it before? Woo! And we have the newly reimagined Masters of Arts program in Human Rights and Educational Justice. Raise your hand if you're in that program. So 50 years ago, a group of critical educators had a vision for a department rooted in multiculturalism, a radical concept at that time, centering the educational needs of bilingual, immigrant, and communities of color. They were highly influenced by the then fairly new theories of a little-known scholar named Paulo Freire from Brazil, and many had worked closely with him. Jose Yanes was a founding faculty member of the department in 1975, joined by Alma Flor Ada in 1976, Dodi Messerschmidt in 1978, and others such as Father Denny Collins and Rosita Galang, and others who joined in the 1980s. Gabriela Pisano Martin was the first person to graduate with a Doctor of Education in International and Multicultural Education. In 1979. There are so many people here today and others who couldn't join us who've contributed so much to IME over the past 50 years. A special shout out to Beverly Hawk, who ran the Reading the World Conference for so many incredible years. And to Peter Baird, Duarte Silva, and so many other alumni who founded the Paulo Freire Scholarship that continues to support our students. And a special shout out to Edgar Lampkin, who is the executive director of the California Association of Bilingual Education, and whose efforts to celebrate Alma Flor Ada at the past CABE conference this past March spurred us into action to organize this event. So thank you. For many of the 5 decades since IME's founding, the department existed at the margins of the School of Education and the University of San Francisco, having to fight for our existence, for enough faculty, for enough resources. We are fortunate that for the past decade, we have had a core IME faculty member as our wonderful Dean of the School of Education. And I want to extend our gratitude to Shabnam Koirala Azad for her tremendous support of today's conference and celebration. In these times more than ever, it's so important to celebrate our struggles for social justice, even when the odds are against us. So this little department that could, founded in 1975, is here today celebrating 50 years of being a pocket of hope, where the values of justice, dignity, solidarity, and belonging ground our everyday work. Our previous department chair and dear colleague, Dr. Emma Fuentes, spearheaded the writing of the core tenets that frame our work in IME. And they are: every human being deserves dignity, safety, and belonging. No one is disposable. 2, we grieve all loss of life. We aim to channel our collective grieving towards transformative action to address injustice. 3, we reject binary either-or thinking and understand that we can hold multiple perspectives and complexities. 4, love, study, struggle. We turn to histories and critical analyses of power to contextualize our current moment, to work for a more just future. 5, our liberation is connected to others, and we look to social movements and transformative solidarities for our ways forward. With those tenets in mind, I want to invite our presenters and tell you a little bit about our panelists for IME across the decades. We will first hear from Dr. Alma Flor Ada, a celebrated and renowned author, scholar, and professor emerita at the University of San Francisco. She is a former Radcliffe Scholar at Harvard University and Fulbright Research Scholar. Dr. Ada's numerous children's books of poetry, narrative, folklore, and nonfiction have received prestigious awards. Among the many are the Christopher Medal, the Pura Belpre Medal, the Parents' Choice Honor, and the International Latino Book Award for multiple books. In 2014, the Mexican government honored her with the prestigious Otli Award for her service to Mexican communities in the United States. We will then hear from our dear colleague, Dr. Susan Roberta Katz, Professor Emerita of IME, where she taught for 27 years and co-founded the graduate program in human rights education. In 2008, founded it in 2008. She's a former public school, middle school teacher in San Francisco. She received her MA, PhD in Education and Language and Literacy at UC Berkeley. And since 2010, she has participated in collaborative research and educational projects with indigenous communities in both Ecuador and Colombia. Her co-edited book, Bringing Human Rights Education to US Classrooms, was published by Palgrave in 2015. Next, we will hear from Dean Shabnam Koirala Azad, who is passionate and dedicated scholar of social justice and is a fourth-generation educator. Her passion for education comes from her multi-generational experience. She started her career at USF in 2005, 20 years ago, as a faculty member in IME, where she expanded the comparative and global dimensions of the department, and she co-founded with Susan the concentration and program in human rights education. In 2017, Shabnam was selected as our Dean of the School of Education. She is the first permanent dean who is a woman, not acting dean, and was the first woman of color dean and the first dean of Nepali origin in the entire United States. And finally, we'll hear from Dr. Whitney Garrett Walker, Assistant Dean of Credentialing and Partnerships at the School of Education and an IME alumna. Dr. Garrett Walker is a scholar practitioner with over a decade of service to urban public schools in Oakland and San Francisco, and actively engages liberatory frameworks such as Black feminism, indigenous feminisms, decolonization, and critical leadership. She's the co-editor of 2 recent books, and her first solo authored book is tentatively titled On Sunflowers and Solidarity and is forthcoming with Bloomsbury. So I'll now turn the floor over to Dr. Ada, and she is the Alma, the soul of IME, yes. And we're so excited to have you here.
Thank you deeply, from the bottom of my heart. Thank you to the organizers of this celebration. What a privilege to share space with admirable educators and to have the joyful opportunity to speak under a banner that declares without any hesitation the IME principles: learning for resistance, love, and liberation. And thanks to all of you for your presence and for giving me the opportunity to share some memories and reflections about the IME program. This program has been a very significant part of my life, and it continues to be, through my connection with my former students, as well as current friends in IME and the School of Education, which, thanks to you, we have taken over. Sometimes our voice is heard, not so much for what we did, but for the fact that one has been there. These words are not originally my own, but they might well explain why I'm addressing you at this point. I was there. The School of Education IME program was a brainchild of Dr. Jose Llanes, a Cuban sociologist, and became a reality with the support of Dean Alan Calvin. I joined it when it was still called ME program, Adding international to the focus and name of the program was a suggestion from Professor Dr. Anita de France, who I want to remind and honor here, when she transferred from the Curriculum and Instruction Department to enrich IME with her wisdom, commitment, and strength. Dr. Jose Llanes had been a professor of sociology in Cuba at the University of Havana. University founded in 1728, and you will allow me the Cuban pride of saying that it was older than all but 5 of US universities. When he emigrated to the United States, he lived in New York, and due to his limited English, sustained himself initially as a dishwasher in a restaurant at the Waldorf Astoria. There, he had first-hand experience of the struggles faced by multicultural immigrants. Since he worked at night, he devoted his daytime hours to get an inside view of New York's best universities. He invested what he could save from his salary in good clothes. He realized that by being well-dressed and acting naturally, he could move undisturbed through university campuses and even sit in during some classes. His research allowed him to find the person whom he decided that he wanted to follow. He would learn to speak like Joshua Fishman. He read Fishman books with the help of a dictionary. He listened with great attention to his lectures, and eventually he bought himself a small cassette player so that he could best imitate Fishman's style of speech. This is how a Cuban sociology professor ended up speaking New York Jewish English. He was convinced that the delivery would be as important as the content of what he wanted to say. When years later, Jose approached Fishman to speak about bilingual education, Fishman was extremely surprised and demanded to know how come Jose spoke just like him. I never learned how Jose Llanes and Alan Calvin became friends. I do know that they did consultancy work together in New York City, and that when Dr. Calvin became the first Jewish dean of the University of San Francisco, there was an interesting period there of openness at USF to diversity. Didn't last long, fortunately. He brought, Dr. Calvin brought Dr. Llanes as an administrator in charge of developing a program in bilingual multicultural education. The program was initiated as a master's program with 4 components, offering bilingual credentials in Spanish, Filipino, Chinese, and Japanese. The year I joined, the decision has been made to expand the program by adding a doctoral component. The doctoral program would be supported by a grant from the Office of Bilingual Education, Title VII. Taking into account the high tuition rate of USF, Dr. Llanes decided that all the money provided by the Title VII grant would be used to pay the tuition of the fellows. No money would be diverted to any pursuits, and that is how further grant applications, which I mostly wrote, were written as long as the Title VII funds were available. For that first year of the doctoral program, Jose Llanes made some very surprising decisions. For fellows, he identified educators with a strong commitment to bilingual education or education of minorities in general. Since they all had full-time jobs, he arranged for the classes to have a special schedule. Now, the School of Education had scheduled classes on alternate Saturdays, but with a sense of urgency, Dr. Llanes decided that the IME doctoral program classes would be held every weekend on Saturday and Sunday for a year. This could also be justified because there would be no specific courses nor hired professors, but instead guest speakers who traveled from around the country and Canada to San Francisco. Thus, it makes sense for them to making that trip would they spend at least 2 whole days with the students. Since only two faculty members, Dr. Aida Yoshi and myself, had doctorate degrees, all the faculty members of the master program would participate as students in the same program as the Title VII fellows. Of course, Dr. Yanes, Dr. Yoshi, and myself were present in all sessions. We would not have missed them for anything. It was a monumental program. The speakers all provided extensive reading lists to be read before the visit in order to facilitate rich conversations. We had the opportunity to listen, to read, and to discuss the most significant experts in bilingual education at the time: Theodore Anderson, Bruce Gardner, Joshua Fishman, Wallace Lambert, Richard Hawker, and others. The speakers were hired with the money that would have covered the salary of regular USF professors. The students were registered in all of the required courses to fulfill the total hours needed for a doctoral degree in that 1 year. At the end of that extraordinary year, one, the intellectual stimulation had been admirable. Two, all the students had received credit for the full number of units required for a doctorate. They were not expected to attend any other classes since they did not need any further coursework. Three, very few of the students had an idea of an area they would like to research, and none had a dissertation topic nor had done any work towards developing a proposal. Four, Jose Yanes accepted a job at another university. Five, Dr. Calvin asked me to change for a year my position from faculty to administrator and name me doctoral program coordinator. This was a fabulous challenge to face. Only a few of the students of that initial group decided to attend writing a dissertation. Since they were not attending classes, it took years of individual work with the few who decided to achieve that goal. One of the few who completed was Dr. Rey del Portillo, director of San Francisco Bilingual Program, who I am glad to recognize here. He was an outstanding educator and did a great deal for bilingual education. He was the director of the San Francisco Bilingual Program, and I enjoy advisement sessions with him in a small fisherman hut in front of the Bay Area during his lunch breaks. Another one was Tomi Tominaga, who had been the coordinator of the IME Japanese strand and went to teach Japanese in the lower campus. Nonetheless, I am very grateful to Jose Yanes, not only for offering me the position at San Francisco, at USF, which I didn't even know had an opening. First, for having shown me the possibility of daring to challenge traditional educational formats. Yes. And also for instilling in me the determination to encourage students to begin thinking about their dissertation from their first year. In the specific case of Gabriela Pisano, from our first meeting. Wow. After Jose Yanes left, the program was redesigned to have a format that more closely matched that of the other doctoral programs in the School of Ed. At the time, the School of Ed was the only school at USF with doctoral programs, with a weekend schedule, with a multicultural program and multicultural faculty. We really were unique. As a result, the School of Ed was required to prove their merit, the merit of those doctoral programs, which were frequently suspected by other schools. One difficult challenge was to prove the validity of qualitative research as equally worthy as quantitative research, since at the time, the prevailing thought was that only numbers, not words, could provide acceptable information. With that discussion that continued for some time, we had very valuable assistance from faculty from other education programs, mainly Dr. Annie Herda, Dr. John Avis, and Dr. Patricia Busk. As for the inspiration received from Jose Yanes to create a new path for a program that was dealing with new concepts and ideas, I was able to create what at the time were somewhat daring initiatives in my teaching while staying within the rules that I could not bend. Every time I tried, I was punished. I also need to acknowledge that there were some very rocky and painful times in the USF, when some unscrupulous behavior by a former administrator almost led to the closing of the program with serious consequences to the university. Yet, the program was able to survive that difficult period, something that in the current troublesome times we're living is a good reminder of the power of resistance. For me, the joys of my time at IME included seeing the progress of many. You all know that I am very moved, right? This was making reading and speaking somewhat difficult. So that joy of my time at IME included seeing the progress for many of my master's students, directing the dissertations of 162 advisees. If you want to see the list in my book, a lifelong journey of becoming a teacher, you can see their names and their dissertation titles. But above all, experiencing the development of a true community of learners, and I want to insist on this. So many of you have come to thank me, to tell me such nice words, but you know, it has never been me alone. I would not have been able to do not even a very small fraction of the things that we achieved had it not been for the community students that supported it. We really were a family. And that community of learners has expanded to be a community of leaders in the developing fields of bilingual and multicultural education. While the graduates move on to diverse positions in different areas of the state and the country, they have continuously collaborated in supporting the same goals. It is an honor for this program that one of our graduates, Dr. Santiago Wood, has been for several years the president of the National Association of Bilingual Education, NABE. And during his valuable leadership, Santiago has frequently publicly recognized and given credit to the IME program. With regards to pedagogical innovations, I will briefly share some highlights from the classes I taught. I was able to have my advisees participate while in their first year in my advanced research course, which was designed for last year's students. When I was told that this was not permissible and challenged by authority on that, I found a way. I encouraged students who wanted to be my advisees to sign up for a direct studies course that they had a right to do, and then fulfill that directed study by attending the advanced research course, although they would not be formally registered. I consider of great importance that students develop from the very beginning an idea of what would be expected to achieve at the end of the program. I found this to be very beneficial for everyone. For the students already working on their dissertation, it was an opportunity to share their work, their experiences, their concerns with the students who were just beginning the journey, and for the beginners to understand the steps that most advanced students have taken. Inviting students to see the dissertation as composed of different parts, I encourage them to choose early on an area, or even better, a problem to study. And then, whenever possible, they could frame their term papers or course requirements as part of the future dissertation. This allowed them to accomplish a great deal of work along the way. And for this, I developed a handbook, The Joy of Research, that I brought a copy for you. I had the privilege of having Dr. Constance Butel one of my advisees be my teaching assistant in several courses. And together, we created a handbook doing participatory research. By the way, I want to say that I wanted to name that first handbook, The Joy of Research, because Paulo Freire always said, the joy of learning. And I wanted to pass on to my students that research would also be a joy. After explaining the benefits of not attempting to complete the program in isolation, I asked students in my courses to form groups. Each group will work in a project whose final product would be the work of all, but it would also have distinguished aspects for which each individual person in the group had been responsible. Sometimes when parts of a group, some people do more work than others, unless they have also individual responsibilities. Each group also had two other responsibilities. One was to chronicle the class twice this semester. This meant synthesizing the content, presentations, and discussions of the class, as well as any other significant moment, guest speaker, individual achievement, reading recommendations, suggestions for projects. And I have also brought some samples of those chronicles to you. I understand that in these times of high technology, they might look perhaps a little naive to you, but I found that having each class documented and then starting the next class with a recollection of that previous was highly, highly successful and beneficial for everyone. The second responsibility, in addition of the chronicle, was what we call food and cultural sharing. During the class break, the group in charge provided a treat, not only sharing some special food, but also music, photos, information, and our personal anecdotes from one or more of the cultures represented in that group. One of my favorite activities today is to maintain correspondence with elementary school children. Been corresponding constantly, so I write them, they write me back, and I answer, and so I'm learning a great deal from that. I'm also getting really a lot of joy from their trust and their questions and their hope, and particularly when they tell me that they want more of my books, because when they have children, they want to read their children more of the books with the same characters and all of that. It's really beautiful. Well, what I wanted to say here is that with their delightful honesty, they frequently share that their favorite subject, not that I asked them, but other people have asked them, and they share that. And they tell me one thing or another, but several will say that their favorite subject is recess. And I wonder whether my IME students would have occasionally shared that their favorite part of the classes was the food and cultural sharing. At the end of each class, I asked students to answer anonymously in a form that I provided some feedback to the class, referring to questions like, what was most important in class today? What did I learn? How did I learn it? What did others learn from me? How could this process be enriched, modified, improved, or changed? What other topics or issues would I like to have as part of presentation and discussions? I collected the forms, typed and printed them, and at the beginning of the next class, just as the students were sharing the chronicle of the previous class, I handed them their own reflections. This way of reflecting together about how we could modify or enrich the class strengthened our sense of community. It was not my class, it was our class. It also carried a strong message of the challenge that every educator faces, regardless of the age of their students, to recognize and respect the diversity of experience, learning styles, preferred or personal concerns that are always present in every class. They were very surprised one time that half of the class was saying, we really like that you allow these students to speak so much. It's important for us to do that. And the other half was saying, we don't like that you let these students speak so much. We're here to listen to you. And so there you have the diversity. And it was like a surprise to these educators that these different positions could exist within the same group. The idea of having a weekend retreat away from USF at the beginning of each semester came from the students, having a place where we could freely discuss in total confidence their ideas, concerns, hopes, intentions regarding their students, their work, personal and professional life. It turned to be an extraordinary idea. Friday night dinner offered space to become acquainted or reacquainted. Afterwards, the students created the agenda for the next day, and small groups found time and space to explore their own interest. Participation in the retreat was optional, but the audience was always high. All of us, myself included, paid the same fees for room and board and benefited from the time we spent together. I'm very grateful to Dr. Duarte Silva, who took on many times the responsibility of making the reservations and necessary arrangements. I am also grateful to all of the students who participated enthusiastically, some even returning many years after they had already graduated. They would not miss coming to the retreat. Some students invited friends who later went on to join the program, thus helping to strengthen our community. I have immense gratitude to some friends from outside USF who contributed very generously to my work here. We probably would never have had the opportunity to interact so closely with Paulo Freire without the support of Martin Carnoy, who first brought him to Stanford. There, I was able to take part for a weekend in a small seminar with Paulo and a few of his followers. This led Dr. Carnoy to suggest that the next time he invited Freire to come to Stanford, we could also have him at USF. Much gratitude to a few of my progressive friends in the Bay Area who were willing to offer a series of workshops where they work ad honorem so that all the tuition paid by the workshop participants, gracias mil. Gracias, mi amor. I would now, borrowing Freire style, say, the joy of a son. So these friends work ad honorem, and all the tuition paid by the workshop participants cover our portion of Paulo's trip expenses and honorarium. I have to know that at that time, when Freire had recently returned to Brazil from exile, he was denied both his former academic position as well as the payment of the retirement that was due to him from previous work. So Carnoy was very clear on explaining that we had to cover all the expenses. Now, and we did seduce the people coming to our workshops. I also taught one of them. We had 5 different workshops going on, and they would, at the end, be able to listen to Paulo at the church on his conference, and that was one of the drawing forces, although they participated very eagerly in the workshops. For future presence of Freire at USF, I realized I had other resources. I could teach an additional course on intercession and have them save my salary to pay for Freire's needs. And I also took additional dissertation advices, and that also allowed the dean's office to return my due payment and use it to pay Paulo's honorarium. I also extend my gratitude to friends who were willing to visit and speak in my classes without any economic compensation. And thus at various times, the students interacted with Robert Philipson and Toves Kudnat Kangas from Roskilde University in Denmark, foremost defenders throughout the world of linguistic human rights. They also had in class Maria Torres Guzman, director of Columbia Teachers College Bilingual Education Program, Mary Poplin from Claremont, Catherine Walsh, Jim Cummins, Stephen Krashen, and other equally renowned scholars, which I am grateful to have as friends. I am also very grateful that eventually USF began to recognize Freire's significance and appointed Father Collins, a Freirean scholar, as an IME faculty. Something no one today would suspect, since Freire has become such an important presence in IME, is that very early in the life of the program, a doctoral student who had transferred from Emory University in Georgia wanted to write her dissertation about Paulo Freire, but her proposal was denied by the dean's office that said that Freire was not an educator, but a politician, and therefore it was not an acceptable topic. In these challenging times we're facing today, may remembering the struggles of the past and the changes we have been able to achieve rekindle our hope and our determination. My gratitude to all students who facilitated my learning alongside them and from them, and who have honored me with the gift of their friendship, and sometimes also their publications. And I have brought a number of publications of former students, now graduates, that you can look at. My constant gratitude goes to my 4 children, my greatest support through life. 2 of them graduated from USF. My daughter Rosalma completed the IME Master's program, and my son, as you just met, Gabriel, graduated from the School of Business. He's present here today, as he has been in many of the most important moments in my life. I want to recognize Dr. Gabriela Pisano Martin, who was the first IME student to graduate with a doctoral degree and who really taught me a great deal about directing a dissertation. And special thanks to Dr. Beverly Hawk, who suggested that as a class project we could sponsor a conference on multicultural children's literature. Her enthusiasm and leadership encouraged many students to follow her, and together for 15 years, USF sponsored through the IME program the Reading the World Conference, whose name honors Paulo Freire. Reading the World became an extraordinary meeting place for some of the most celebrated authors and illustrators, as well as highly recognized scholars in this field. What we initially thought would be a conference for our students, along with teachers and librarians from the larger Bay Area, developed into something with a much wider reach. From the very first conference, where we had as keynote speakers such extraordinary authors as Virginia Hamilton, Arnold Adolph, Ashley Bryan, Jack Sipes, and our own Herb Cole, a surprising phenomenon took place. The keynote speakers chose to sit through one another's presentations, mingling with the audience and participating enthusiastically in the question and answer sessions after each talk. That first year, the presenters also requested to not have lunch in a private setting as had been originally planned, but to instead eat informally, sitting with the students and other participants in various areas of the building and outdoors. Reading the World continued to have extraordinary speakers. Some of the speakers decided to continue coming and offering to speak without any reward, without any compensation, at their own expense, because they thought that this was most fruitful space for children's literature in the country. And I am going to finish expressing my admiration to the extraordinary creators of the IME program renaissance for recognizing and strengthening the values and aspirations with whom it was founded. While diversity, equality, inclusion as foundations of social justice and therefore of the possibility for true peace find themselves under disregard and attack, you have decided to resist with love in a country that is getting so diverse, and through that, resistance and love to achieve liberation. To Shabnam, Koirala Azad, Whitney Garrett Walker, Monisha Bahar, and Susan Katz, and all who support their efforts, my most profound gratitude and solidarity. I can assure you I have measured it at home, but I wasn't nervous then.
Whoa. It's amazing. Thank you.
The emotion. First of all, just thank you so much to Monisha, Rosa, all the organizers of this incredible event today. So I poured a lot into a very short time limit, and I welcome any questions at the end. But as you can understand, one of the best decisions of my life was joining the IME faculty. And for that, I'm forever grateful to our beloved Alma Flor Ada, who first recruited me to join the department and then asked me to carry the IME torch when she retired in 2004. So I am going to focus my comments on what happened from 2004 to around 2014, when we had a whole big change in the dean's office and Shabnam Azad became associate dean. So I came to IME, much like all of you, as a longtime social justice activist. I was seeking a professional space that aligned with my values, a space that welcomed those powerful voices that are so always traditionally marginalized in academia, and a space that ran counter to the competitiveness of the university. In this search, I found my home in IME, and even though I retired, I still haven't left. Although I started actually in 1996 in teacher education, but I was such an IME wannabe. I went to all the retreats and everything. And then Alma asked me, thankfully, to be the third reader on many of her doctoral dissertation committees. And in contrast to my own experience at UC Berkeley, I was blown away that IME students were encouraged to do participatory action research in their own communities where they could make a real impact. What a concept, huh? Yeah. And I also was so struck by how IME students supported each other. And for example, on teaching weekends, the local people would host people who came from far away. And just even something like a dissertation defense in IME became a celebration with delicious food and colorful artwork, open to everyone, friends, family. This is unheard of. So I love that, and that spirit of hospitality and generosity and camaraderie is what was so palpable and still is in IME. So IME has always embodied the Jesuit mission of USF more than any other program, or okay, I won't say that, but attracted the most diverse students and faculty and successfully prepared future leaders. I remember looking and finding out that every single college of education in the California State University system had an IME grad on its faculty. Wow. That's pretty amazing. And yet internally, as Alma spoke, IME was always treated as a stepchild. So by the time Alma retired in 2004, the number of full-time faculty went from 7 to 2.5 over a 6-year period. But the number of students stayed the same. So I was one of those 2.5. So because of that, and it was such a time of pivotal transition with retirements and changes, we conducted, those of us, the 2.5, conducted a self-study where we interviewed and collected feedback from current students and former alums. And their recommendations included strengthening the the international in IME, and hiring more faculty, clearly, and of shaping a new vision for the department. So in 2005, we began to evolve and grow. We hired Shabnam Azad for a position in global studies and education, and then Emma Fuentes and Latino studies and education, and Betty Taylor, who had expertise in African American education, joined IME from organization and leadership. During this time, the MA TESOL program stayed steady under the leadership of first Dodi Messerschmidt, then Stephen Carey, and then Sadiq Popal. So, and then our new faculty cohort in IME saw human rights education as a potential framework to link the local and the global and to expand our justice orientation. This was, keep in mind, this was during the time of George W. Bush. This is 2005, 2006, during his regime. Politically, what was happening was that we were living through the aftermath of 9/11 with invasions of Afghanistan, Iraq, the Islamophobia, and the human rights violations happening under the so-called war on terror. So a lot of repression domestically as well. At USF, it was a good environment for human rights education. We joined a cross-campus human rights collaborative that included sponsorship of the Human Rights Film Festival. And this collaborative was the law school, arts and sciences, and then we joined. In 2007, we piloted a special topics class called Human Rights Education Concepts and Pedagogies with 18 IME students. I'm looking at one. Dr. Nello Dixon was in that class. Maybe, I think, yeah, okay, well, okay. I'd just like to, and so we wanted to see if this framework worked and made sense for the current students. This class included case studies on the, quote, war on terror and human rights violations, such as the use of torture, and immigrants' rights was a case study, racial injustice and Hurricane Katrina, and genocide in Darfur. So the idea was to explore these issues in depth with the purpose of then sharing that knowledge with their classrooms and communities. Then we surveyed the students at the end of the class and incorporated their feedback when we started the human rights concentration, which meant 4 courses, and the concentration was in the master's and doctoral program. And 5 years later, after high student enrollment and the development of new courses like human rights and social movements, we were able to lure Monisha Bajaj away from teacher scholarship, away from Columbia, to direct the new MA, Master of Arts in Human Rights Education, the first in the country. So our progress in developing human rights education built on our foundation in Freirean pedagogy, reflecting the IME approach, which I would say encompasses, we always listen to students, we work collaboratively in teams, both as faculty and with students, we respond to the world around us in a critically conscious way, and we continually strive to take a stand on the right side of history. So I want to give a couple, just two quick examples of what we did during those events we had during those 10 years. In February 2009, an IME faculty student team organized a forum to raise awareness about the crisis in Israel-Palestine, 2009. This was in response to Operation Cast Lead, or what is known as the First Gaza War, when Israeli airstrikes killed 1,400 Palestinians. Hundreds of those were children, women, and unarmed civilians. Second thing, for 3 summers from 2011 to 2013, IME led an immersion program in the Amazon region of Ecuador, where we studied intercultural bilingual education and indigenous rights and environmental justice in partnership with indigenous communities of the Southern Amazon. So these are two of many examples of how IME has supported all of us to engage in freedom dreaming. I'm struck, mentioning those examples, how it seems like we might not be able to do that now. And so in this current moment. But IME has always been about strategically finding possibilities in the impossible. And as I look back, I feel like, wow, how blessed I've been to have discovered this academic home that aligns so closely with my head and my heart. It all began with Alma Flor and just keeps growing with Shabnam, Emma, Monisha, Rosa, Melissa, Sadiq, Dave, Colette, and all of you here today, everybody here today. And just before closing, I want to acknowledge the invaluable contributions of IME faculty who are no longer with us on this earth. Professors Aida Joshi, Anita DeFrance, Rosita Galong, Father Dennis Collins, and Betty Taylor. May they all rest in peace. And que viva IME! We need you more than ever. We didn't plan wearing animal pictures.
Susan and I were joking about that this is what happens when you work together for a while. Start dressing like each other. It's so wonderful to look around the room and see so many faces from, over the decades, really. And it's, thank you so much, Alma, for your work in creating this beautiful community and this beautiful space. And your words were truly so moving. When I joined IME, we would hear, these are Alma's students, and Alma did this and did that. And so for us from the beginning, you were a great source of inspiration, even though I didn't personally get to work with you. Your legacy is so strong in IME. And I also wanted to call in Rosita Galang, who was mentioned earlier, but when we started, and I say we because Dr. Fuentes, Emma Fuentes and I started around the same time, so I feel like anything I share is a we, because I couldn't have done it without the close collaboration of Dr. Fuentes. And so it feels really like, Dr. Rosita Galang, I think about her because, one of the most understated probably, but most effective educators and administrator. She was the chair of the IME department. And I often think about her because we've heard a lot about the history of IME, and there's a lot that's really inspiring. We know IME as a program, there's, it's an intellectual journey. We heard about the move from claiming qualitative research, really thinking about methods, thinking about how the means has to match the end, that it's not really about producing this amazing work, but really it's the process of becoming conscious, as Freire says, that, marks this educational experience. So there's a lot about IME, but over the years, we've also often asked the question, what is it about IME that does make it different? What is it? What is that we all say IME has changed us? I hear this from students, I feel it myself, and I think IME is embodied. I think there's something about IME that's really an embodied experience, that it's beyond just the intellectual. So I wanted to shed light, drawing on these histories, talking about Rosita. Like when I think of Rosita, I'm like, she embodied IME. You didn't have to hear her say much. She just had this warmth and invitation and ability to make us feel good. She had this ability to strategize without saying much, and so on and so forth. So as I was thinking about these embodied aspects of IME, I was also thinking they're often simple things that are just so radical, and I think we need to kind of start to, hopefully throughout the day it's happening, that we're really lifting up these gems that make us IME. And Dr. Fuentes was the one that originally introduced me to the work of Grace Lee Boggs, and I know Melissa Canlas often uses Grace Lee Boggs, but Grace Lee Boggs talked about growing our souls in community, right? And I often think about, like, why did she say growing our souls? Like, why not growing our intellectual selves or growing our, ourselves in general? But I think this growing souls has a deeper implication for us as humans, And for me, within the realm of higher education, within the realm of our, current realities, this sort of, you all know IME, so we get into these frameworks that shape our reality, the forces that shape our reality. We think about capitalism, we think about these, racism, we talk about patriarchy, like all these intersecting forces that create a reality that, Boggs says we're complicit in. Like, it's not just about blaming others, but it's a part of all our realities. And so within that, growing our souls. So what is it that we do in IME to grow our souls? One is quite simple, and it was touched on by both Alma and Susan, that we believe that education, or the process of education, or the process of learning, is deeply relational.
Yes.
That, when we come together and we're, in a learning environment, it requires certain attributes in order to make that happen. One is that we all try to assume a humble posture of learning, right? Regardless of who we are. We might be the instructor, we might be the learner, but part of what this requires of us is to come together and assume this posture of learning that then allows us to learn from each other, that it allows us to recognize each other's deep histories and legacies and what makes us unique, and all of that this kind of relational space. Bell Hooks talks about how liberal individualism has made an assault on community, right? So it's the same idea that when we come together in this learning community, and it's this relational fact that we pay attention to, that's essentially a response to that assault. And similarly, in this competitive capitalist neoliberal frame, we also then thinking about collaboration as the mode of operation, which was talked about too, the coming together for the retreats and coming together in class and working with each other and encouraging cross-group work. that itself, the collaboration being a mode of operation in this program, that it defines a culture, is actually quite radical.
Yes.
Within higher ed, that's highly competitive, that's highly individualistic, and at the same time, you know, it's all about this intellectual. So in this relational work that requires us to practice these attributes, we're actually then coming together in a different way. And in doing so, we're responding to these larger forces in simple but very radical ways. The other part that I often think about in IME that sort of sets IME apart is another attribute which I think is part of growing our souls, and that's a level of detachment. You know, many of us are in institutions where we're very attached to our ideas, we're very attached to programs we create, we're very attached to a lot of things. And in IME, we've often thought about something that I've called, the need for an evolving conceptual framework, right? That if we're attached to ideas, to the same way of doing things, that we actually miss out. The world changes rapidly and we're still doing the same things and trying to figure out why things aren't working or why the things that we do don't address the issues that we see in the world. And so this ability, we heard how from the beginning, the ability to change and to create new programs and to work together again is not something that happens so easily in higher ed. Trust me. It's not easy. And in IME, it's always been seamless. It's amazing, that we can engage in a conversation. This is how the HRE program came about. Dr. Katz had gone to, a seminar, came back and said, hey, don't you think this would be a great idea? And I had, been born, raised in Nepal, did research there, and I said, absolutely. Like, human rights has been a big part of, how I've thought about, our efforts towards change. And in IME, we can work together and actually change the frameworks in order to make sure that it responds also to the needs of our time. So we're not even just taking these frameworks at face value, but we're problematizing them and then moving them forward. So, time? Okay. I could go on, but I will say one more thing, that I think one other thing that sets us apart in IME is the fact that, we're in many intellectual spaces where we can sort of pinpoint the issues that we see, right? It's even in critical education, there's this tendency to say, okay, well, here are, all the issues that we see in the world, and so what? Now what? And I feel like in IME, we've always had a call to action out of there. Right? Whatever it is, whether we utilize methods, whether we utilize our imagination, whether we utilize our creativities in various forms, that there is an action that we see. Right? There is, we put our ideas into action, we test them out. And to close, we've been many times now in conversation with a scholar named Ruha Benjamin. And she often says, like when you think about the issues in the world, when you think about the breadth of the issues that we see these days, how can we actually call ourselves to action when it's so easy to be apathetic, right? It's so easy to step back and say, gosh, it's all too big. Don't know where to start. And so she gives us this image of a little plot, right? She says, just choose your plot. Choose your plot. Sow some seeds, start tilling that little plot, and that's our starting point. Then we bring all our plots together. So when I think about my experience in IME, it was that little plot with Dr. Katz, Dr. Fuentes, with Monisha, with so many who've come after, we were able to say, this is our little plot. It doesn't matter what's happening. We're going to till this soil. We're going to sow some seeds. We're going to see what happens. And the beauty of that with our fellow farmers was that when I had the opportunity then to bring those learnings to the whole School of Education, the way I could imagine it was that I had learned some of these tools from everyone. I had learned how to sow these seeds, and the plot just simply became larger. So thank you so much. Thank you all. Dr. GW.
All right, y'all, we almost done. We almost getting ready to have that discussion. If you need to shake your energy, move your body, do what you need to do, all right? Do what you need to do. So hello, everyone. Bendiciones. Nawi. Hello to all of you. Bendiciones mayores y menores. If you are in this room, I come to you as Yawo, if you know what that is. Bendiciones to you if you do not. Then I am Dr. Whitney Louise Garrett Walker, and I'm so excited to be in this space with you all. I also want to, I know earlier we gave blessings to the land. I myself, as a Black and Indigenous woman, my tribe is the Natchitoches tribe of Louisiana. So I want to honor the Ohlone, the Ramaytush Ohlone, the Muwekma Ohlone in this place. I would also like to honor the Natchitoches tribe of Louisiana in this space, as well as my ancestors who were forcibly brought from various parts of Africa and forced into chattel slavery, et cetera. When you see them, when you hear about them, you hear about me, all right? So as you can imagine, my introduction of myself is exclusively IME. Exclusively, and for that I am very, very grateful. I also want to shout out and show immense gratitude to my colleagues, my loved ones, Victoria Duran, Doctora Victoria Duran. I want to honor Danielle. I want to honor Heather Streets. I want to honor Khan. I want to honor Frangelo. I want to honor Didem, who I got to hug and squeeze this morning. We believe in relationality and family, and those were the people who I leaned on, who leaned on me in order to finish and become the doctors that you see before you. Beyond that, also wanting to show immense gratitude to Alma, Susan, Auntie Monisha, and Dean Koirala Azad for the opportunity to be here. And this is one of the rare opportunities where you're able to physically be in proximity to the elders and giants whose shoulders you stand on top of. And so when we talk about gratitude, we're not just saying, oh my God, and let me check a box. No, to have a department, to have a school of education that can say, learning for resistance, love, and liberation right now, but also have done that 50 years ago, is actually very powerful, right? And I think being part of this panel is very special as not just the youngest natally, but also the reality of a dream deferred. And so I want to start by also saying, we were asked a couple of questions. What does IME mean to you? And I think telling a short story, because I want to be mindful of time, I started in this program fall 2016. I was newly married. Shout out to my wife, Dr. J. Garrett Walker in the room. And shout out to our baby, Cadence Paz Garrett Walker in the room. I was a principal in Oakland. I was looking for more. Of course, I could have joined an educational leadership program, which I did, and was very, very disillusioned. And after a conversation with Dr. Bajaj, I said, holy cow, we get to learn about theory that matters to help understand the frames of what's going on in the world right now. And insert, Dr. Emma Fuentes in my Social Cultural Foundations course. I wanted to know about Bourdieu. I wanted to know about how Bordeaux, bell hooks, Darayoso, Solorzano, et cetera, were connected, but also how I had the opportunity to create my own homemade theory to make sense of my own experiences as a Black, Indigenous, and queer woman who was also in a presumed leadership role, right? Shout out to Kiera, who was one of my teachers at Skyline High School. I see you here. I also want to name that from that work, from those classes, critical race theory and praxis, whiteness, power, and privilege, that was a class that was amazing, taught by Dr. Neiman. The way that we learned in class is exactly what Alma said. We brought food, right? Numero uno. We had food, we had community, we had a voice. It wasn't a sit and get. And so all of you who are, alum or in the program, that is exactly what it was. I remember very vividly, Victoria would stop by Specialties downtown and bring up multiple boxes of treats. And so it was the sustenance, not just in what we were receiving, but what we were able to create and give to one another. And so my dissertation, while most of us can literally and figuratively sit at the bottom of a river, feel very isolated in the opportunity to just write. Notice I said opportunity and not obligation, okay? Because when you're dissertating, you're bringing all of that knowledge plus your own together. And then you're also reaching for other things while staying very, very focused on what you can do, right? And so my dissertation was titled, Replanting a Wild Seed, Black Women School Leaders Subverting What I Call Ideological Lynching. And so during that time, I had the support of my committee, Dr. Colette Can, Dr. Emma Fuentes, Dr. Patrick Camagnan, and Dr. Rochelle Rogers-R to support and cultivate me while giving physical birth and metaphorical birth with this piece, right? Shortly after my dissertation defense, my family and I uprooted because I got a faculty job at University of Toronto, and it was awesome. It was a beautiful opportunity. And even there with Canadian students, talking about critical race theory was very off-putting to some. But then being able to locate themselves in not this niceness of whiteness, but instead this opportunity to hear differently, right? And understand the experiences of others who don't look like you. That was hard stuff. But it was meaningful and still meaningful today. And so in my work here in the School of Education, where I was graciously welcomed back by Shabnam, Koirala, Azad as an assistant dean, I think that the work of IME is still ever present, right? Very much enjoying the scholarly work of, because that's one of the first things I asked Shabnam. I'm like, how do I be a scholar and be in the dean's office? And she was like, oh, there are a lot of opportunities. There are a lot of opportunities to connect, to continue your scholarship, to continue living these our mission, our vision, our values. And I think from that point, it also allowed me the opportunity to lean back into the praxis of the work that I know, trust, and believe in. And so, again, just to close, when I think of IME, I think of lineage, right? I'm very, even before starting in this program, ancestors are important, both living, those who are not, and eldership and what that means and leaning into it. And I think, I didn't know before today that alma meant soul. Yes. I didn't know that. And I think that my notes already said lineage. You cannot have a lineage without a soul. Yes. You cannot fake a smile either. And so the work that you have done, the work that our elders on this panel have done, we are all grateful. So I'm 2021. All right. And there are many others that came before me and many others who have come after me. And with that, we say thank you.
Beautiful. I'm so inspired, and I stand between you and lunch, but I need to do 3 things. 1, and you can continue conversations with these amazing humans at lunch. I need to thank the organizing committee, my co-conspirator, Rosa Jimenez, for the stay. Jasmine Gota, Matilda Tavares, Michael Robeson, Celia Carrasco, Gabby Martinez, our volunteers today, Shruti Sheshadri, Carmen Barba, Genesis Morales, and so many of you who've jumped in just to pick up the pieces and do a little work. Number 2, we are announcing today the Alma Flor Ada permanent collection of books at the Gleason Library. Alma, you gifted Rosa and I boxes of your books when we visited you in San Rafael. Our amazing librarian, Amy Gilgan, has put this together with the team at Gleason Library. You will have a QR code and a handout later today. You can see some of the images here of all the books that are in the collection. And number 3, we want to do a group photo. So panelists, we're inviting you to come in front of Alma's son in our front row. Yeah, you want to jump in? Okay, jump in.
Hola everybody, I'm Rosa Jimenez, Associate Professor in IME. Just a quick, we're gonna do this huge group photo, but before we jump into that, my phenomenal friend, chair, sister, has thanked everyone but herself. So I want to just do a quick shout out because she's our fierce leader, our chair. I always say I'm her co-chair. I'm supporting all the work that we're doing, but Monisha has really spearheaded this event. She is phenomenal at organizing, leadership, and, pardon? Yes. And I just wanted to say an extra thank you because she's really behind the scenes of all of this, putting this together. Thank you.
So everyone, please come.